everybody. Everybody has a DEI job open. And oftentimes they, reach into their company and find a person of color and make them the DEI person. That's DEI jobs are really tough jobs. If they're going to be, one, they have to be paid and have access to board and CEO. Two, they have to have a staff. And three, they have to know what they're doing. Well, they have to also care about it. They got to be committed and passionate, but they also have to know what they're doing. This is, I don't know how many of you have been in a room, I certainly have on a number of occasions, where somebody comes in as the DEI person and tells us what we can't do so we don't get in trouble, right? I want to see, hold on a minute, don't tell me what I can't do so I won't get in trouble. Tell me how, we can make this work so it's a better organization and more productive in terms of bringing in all kinds of people, which will make us a better place. So I worry that this has become the thing of the day without the right underpinnings of training people of what it means to be good at this job. So I really get fearful in terms of seeing what's going on. I see the nervousness that people have about talking about race and white supremacy. People are afraid to say the wrong thing. People have thin skins, and it's better to make a mistake than not say anything. I find. I mean, we got to talk about it, and I think as a Human Rights Commission should be some of the people pushing it. Maybe we don't have the ability to do it, but we got to find people who do. And I find so many people who know it should be done, but boy, they don't want to be the people on the front line to doing it. Anyway, I mean, I just, wanted to say that I think I told you I spent a weekend at Yale talking to my old colleagues, and I'll say they're old because we're all over 70 now, we're old, who were in the forefront of doing most of these employment discrimination cases in the early 70s. And I'll tell you, it raised my spirit to be around them. They're still full of vim and vigor, and most of them still doing good work. They're mostly retired, but they're involved in things like training DEI folks in thinking about it in the right way, in the ways that are creative and innovative, and having these discussions. And one of the things I learned is the division was one of the few places that had women in those days, which I didn't know. And we had more Black lawyers than any place in the country. More women and more Black lawyers than any place in the country. And I didn't realize it, because what did I know? I just got there out of law school, and I thought, like, this is the way the world is. Boy, was I wrong, right? I said, look at that. Women are treated just like everybody else. And so are Black people. No, it's not the way to start. Then it was all downhill after that. But it was invigorating in some ways. And actually, we're gonna meet again and see if there's something we can do, even as old people, to find ways to be supportive in this effort. It brought me, when I thought about when Boston, if you remember a year ago, when we sent a letter to Mayor Janey, and we said, don't fight this case anymore, that these 9 Black police officers had been fighting for 10 years on a test that had been found discriminatory by 3 courts. And the outside lawyer had recommended they appeal again. And we said, please don't do that, drop the case. And she did drop the case. I'm not saying because of us, but those are the kinds of things that should never go on, right? On a city, should never go on. And it's the kind of role that human rights commissions should be playing. those kinds of lawsuits against cities, human rights commissioners should be stepping in and saying, hell no. No, the city's wrong. You can't do this. The city's wrong. And that's one of the roles that that the Human Rights Commission should be doing. And one of the things I hope to do going forward after this is spending a little time with some of my colleagues from the old days, but looking at some of the ways maybe human rights commissions can play roles that are more productive. You know, one, knowing, you know, we don't know the civil rights suits that have been filed against the city, right? We don't know what they are. Are there class action suits against the city? I don't know. On race discrimination or gender or by transgender people, or I don't know. I have no idea, but it would be good to know. So anyway, you know, I want to know, I'm stepping down. I think I'm going to do a number of things. One of them sort of think through and hopefully be helpful and make some recommendations to you about how I think the Human Rights Commission could be more successful. I also have just taken a position as the chancellor of a Kenyan university in Africa. You know, why not? And it's close by. And so, but I will always be supportive. Clearly, this is not my walking away from these efforts. This is where my passion and commitment lies. I just think that maybe other places where I can be more effective. So more later as we leave, but why don't we move to Susie? Why don't you make your report?
If it's okay, I would like to have the interns present first, only because I know Lilo's at a graduation event. So he's hoping to present earlier on so that he doesn't get cut off or anything. So I'm gonna have the intern start first, so then we can get on with my report and the discussion on bylaws.
Okay, that's fine. Chris Osgood is going to join us at 5:45 because he wants to hear the report on broadband.
Okay, so then we'll have Lilo go first.
Why don't we let Lilo go first, and then you make a report net at 5:45, okay?
Perfect, sounds good.
Right, all right.
1 second.
Because I just want to show, I want people to understand how much the work that Talia has done has been picked up by Ann Swiger and Chris and others, and has been used by them. So that's why I want it. Yeah.
Okay. On that note, Talia, would you like to begin? Oh no, Lilo, sorry. Now I'm confusing myself. Lilo, would you like to start your presentation and introduce yourself and the amazing work that you've been doing over the semester?
Sure, thank you, Susie. Let me just pull up my slides and share them.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see everyone. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to thank the chairwoman, the commissioners, Susie and Roy, for all your leadership and for allowing us to continue our research this term. I did 3 research assignments, one looking at civil service regarding policing, another kind of actually speaking to what the chairwoman was just mentioning, kind of the role of human rights commissions. And then I did a third one just looking and examining police reform. So all those reports have been passed to the commission, but what I'll be talking about today is just specifically the civil service research that I explored. And just to give you a little bit of background, civil service is a required exam for police, fire, and some other local roles. But municipalities have the right to exit from it. They have to petition the state to be able to exit from it, but they are able of exiting. And this came from the Boston Police Task Force that actually recommended the city reassess the civil service requirement pertaining to the Boston Police Department officer disciplinary hiring and promotional policies. And so this is really where this research originated from. And so I'll walk you through 3 big bullet points: identify the police departments that exited the civil service. What do they all have in common? Who are they? Present reasons for their exit, and then evaluate the outcomes of their exit. So far, 35 police departments have left civil service starting 2009, the majority being in 2007. Gardner, Massachusetts has recently announced that they will be petitioning the state to exit, so they are to be announced here. In East Hampton, Massachusetts, I know has definitely exited. I just couldn't identify the exact year, and so I left them as unknown here. But you can see a lot of departments have left. Again, the majority, from 2015, 2017, but gradually departments are considering leaving. And as we think of who these departments are, they tend to come from smaller towns. And so the populations of the municipalities they serve tends to be very small compared to a city like Boston. And the state of the forest tends to be small as well. And if you think of this logically, if a department has 10 police officers and 3 of them leave this year, now you have 3 vacancies and the exam isn't administered till mid next year. And now you have to wait until the exam is administered, and then it may take 3 to 6 months to get the results. And then by the time you get the results, those candidates may not even be qualified. And so if you're only a department of 10, this really puts a strain on your department, puts a strain on your budget, especially your overtime budget. And so this is one of the major reasons that these departments tend to exit. That being said, Framingham's recent exit and the current debate in Worcester, so the city of Worcester is currently debating exiting, signify that bigger cities are beginning to explore exiting the state system. And so if Worcester was to exit, they'd be the most comparable city to Boston to have exited the system. So why leave civil service? I examined a lot of interviews, over 20 interviews that were done by police chiefs to see why they're exiting civil service, what are the reasons they listed. One of the biggest things that I've seen is this frustration that police chief expressed with the antiquated system, really inflexible to work within. It's state ran, they have no control over it. They feel like the exam is outdated. It takes months to get the results. And so it becomes a really inflexible process for them to work within. The civil service exam, and this is, I think, a major and really critical point, does not reflect the skills and knowledge that's actually needed. And so each community is very different. Each town is very different. Each city is very different. And you can test all of that on one exam. And so the things that are being tested on the exam do not reflect the actual skills or knowledge that are needed. Civil service can serve as an obstacle to hiring women. Like all standardized exams, civil service almost becomes like an industry, right? There are people, if you pay them $60, they'll run a course, they'll help you prepare for the exam. You can buy books to prepare for the exam. And so if you are a single parent, you now not only have to find the resources and time to actually take the actual exam, but you also have to find resources and time to get the material to prep, time to study, right, and prepare for the exam. And it becomes a high barrier of entry compared to other interview and recruitment processes. Candidates that pass the exam were not always qualified. So again, you have this mismatch, right, what the exam is actually looking at and what the community actually needs. And so you may have these great candidates pass the exam with flying colors, but once you actually meet them and once you see who they are, you may realize that they're actually not qualified for the job. And the timing of the exams, which is mostly logistical, but just they're administered so infrequently that it can really serve as, it can just put a lot of pressures on local police departments. I'm someone who loves numbers, so I wish I could find you numbers on the outcomes of leaving civil service, but I mostly found qualitative research. So I wanted to kind of draw your attention to the biggest themes regarding the qualitative data that I saw. One of the biggest things I think is really important because Boston Police is struggling with their overtime budget. And I think for the past few years, it has been like over $70 million. And so what I found is that a lot of departments, once they exited civil service, they were able to better manage their overtime budget, right? Now they could hire faster, so they had less vacancies. They could also develop relationships with other police departments. And so potentially police can transfer and fill in. And it just became a little bit more flexible for different departments. Exams can be tailored to better meet the needs of the community. And so departments got really, really creative on the type of exams they designed after they left civil service. So maybe to gauge a candidate's potential, you have them meet with community members, right? So instead of an exam, they're going to meet with a panel of community members. Maybe you're going to take them out in the field and see how they interact in the field. And so design a more tailored, more adapted exams that better meet the needs of the community and also engage the community in the process, right? Once you leave the system, you have more flexibility to do that. Barriers to recruiting women can be better identified and removed. Once you remove the inflexible barrier of civil service, you're able to really examine all your recruitment processes. You have the flexibility to change things and adapt things, and you're able to remove those barriers for recruiting women. Greater flexibility in determining hiring criteria. So maybe you want to have a language preference, right? Or an educational level, community representation. You'd have the flexibility and the authority to prioritize those in hiring. A lot of departments did that regarding language, right? If they wanted Spanish speakers or Vietnamese speakers, they were able to prioritize that. So again, I wish I had hard numbers, but looking at the qualitative data, this is kind of the brush strokes and the big themes that came out of the research. I didn't want to suggest that we, when I say we, the commission, I didn't want to suggest that the commission actually recommend leaving civil service, because if Boston was to leave, it would be an experiment, right? Because no large city has actually left. And so what I thought would be an appropriate next step, and what I would like to suggest, is a way to gauge what the public thinks of this. And so through OPAT and through a coalition that can be formed throughout different city agencies, maybe determining a public forum that's best to gauge public opinion and see what the public thinks, right? And then the commission can provide suggestions for the city, whether that's to exit civil service or to remain within civil service. But I think what's missing from the research is what communities actually think, right? And it's often police chiefs want to leave civil service because it's inflexible. Activists want to leave civil service for activist purposes, but we don't actually know what communities think, right? What individuals and communities think. And so I think given the platform of the commission, you would have the public forum and be able to really gauge what does the public feel about this and what are the best appropriate next steps. So again, thank you for allowing me to do this research, and I'm happy to answer any questions or anything that wants to be clarified or needs to be clarified.
I think that's enormously helpful. I'm trying to figure out what is the downside to giving up the civil service exam. You have to create your own and manage your own.
Yes.
Is that the downside?
You have to create your own, manage your own. I think what the downside is, like, you don't really know how the public's going to perceive it, or you don't know if it's going to actually be worse, right? The civil service exam was started to stop nepotism. So people, to stop the police chief from just hiring their cousin or their brother. And so how do you prevent that corruption from happening within local police departments? Because once you remove the civil service exam, then potentially you may introduce nepotism. But to your point, policies can be created easily to make sure that doesn't happen, right?
Well, we certainly don't have any nepotism in the police department in Boston.
I have a, so I have been part of discussions about the civil service exam for about 20 years. So this discussion has been in the community for about that time. There are people who know what the civil service is, and then there's a lot of people who don't know what that is. So I don't know what consulting or checking with the community would look like, if it would be surveys or not. But I think it's interesting to certainly. I think the issue with cadet programs is not working in terms of race or diversity and gender diversity. So there are other ways, obviously, not only the exam, but I think the exam also includes extra point for veterans.
Yes.
That's something that you didn't talk about, but that's also somehow controversial in terms of, not giving veterans now the extra points that they used to get, etc. Very good presentation. And before I forget, I want you to know that I was reading the paper, the Boston Globe, this past week, and I could see your work already working in the public. Last semester, you worked, you did one of your briefs on linguistic diversity and the linguistic capacity in Boston Police Department. And the city council is picking up on that, and that is your work. I didn't hear that from anybody else in the city, not for the past 20 years. So I want to congratulate you on putting your research out and starting to help shape ideas, if not policy yet. But and I look forward to see the other briefs that you prepare for this semester. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Reyes. And I just wanted to touch on one of the briefs I did was recommendations for the commission, and I did include a community voice piece there. And so that may give you ideas on how to best engage the community.
Annie.
Yes, just thank you very much for this report and all the other reports that you did. I was going to raise the same point that Ray has raised about the veterans' preference, which has come to militarize the police. And, we've been lucky in Boston, but in other cities, not so lucky on the outcomes of those items. And then I just wanted to emphasize that if we were to have a public forum on this hearing, that who the community is matters, so that outreach to all the members of our community, we should really take that serious and let them know that there would be a public hearing on that. But thank you again.
I'll just add one more thing about the veterans. Is some of the departments that have left, so like Framingham, for example, still kept a veteran requirement, but they changed the requirements, right? So maybe up the education level. So now you still got veterans, but maybe you had veterans with master's degrees, maybe veterans with social work backgrounds. And so you're not able to eliminate, you don't necessarily have to eliminate the veteran requirement, right? But you can add other requirements that makes it more representative and better for the community.
Yeah, they're not the same. I know that. You can have one without the other. So getting rid of the civil service exam is not necessarily getting rid of the veterans' preference. Is there a reason that the commission would not recommend that? What if we recommended that the city consider removing the city from the state civil service exam?
I think you have solid qualitative data that I just presented, and I think we can get some quantitative. I think what we're missing is the community informed data. And so maybe we just have to dig that up, right? But kind of the community voice. And I wouldn't want to push a decision unless we had that community voice in there.
So you're suggesting we have a hearing or two, maybe in communities or whatever. Maybe you could come up with what that plan looks like, or working with the staff to what that plan would look like, and then maybe we could come up with a recommendation, which I think would be great. There's another thing going around the country which is called 30 by 30. It's 30 by 2030. Have you heard of it? I think we've talked about it before, which is 30% of police forces women by 2030. And there's hundreds of police departments have signed on, including New York City, but not Boston. Something we might also bring forward in our recommendations is that the city might look at that pledge, since a lot of other people seem to think it's quite important. We have a very low percentage of women on the police force. Do you know what it is? I know it's very low, but I don't know what it is. I think.
I did a memo last term, but I don't have that.
Yes, there was a memo from last semester.
I
Yes.
remember it was very low. It was very low.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? Robert, you know a lot about this stuff.
I think this one issue that comes up significantly with civil service is the ability for promotions to happen and who gets promoted. It seems that it might be interesting in the context of a hearing to examine the significant number of court rulings that have happened in my lifetime when it's come to the Boston Police Civil Service promotional exams, and who gets the cut and who doesn't. and how that I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that some of the rulings undermine the structural racism that was involved. And I think something like that might be a good avenue for start. If we could highlight specifics that are structurally in play that create bias and create actions of discrimination when people are not promoted. I think those type of kind of very specific bullet points would be very salient if we're going to make a recommendation for such a radical change. And I do believe there has been a lot of rulings. And it seems like whenever there is a promotion, especially from sergeant to lieutenant, since it's a very small number, and most people have the very similar backgrounds and scores. So it is interesting. And I think that might be something that would be worth exploring, because that would highlight some of the challenge, not just the recruiting to getting in the door, but who gets to the civil service ranks. Not the political appointees of deputies and superintendents and such, but the civil service ranks of promotions, I think would be important to look at.
That's what the case was about. The 9 Black police officers is from sergeant to lieutenant, and it was about a test, a written test. And one of the questions is, why is there a written test from being a sergeant to a lieutenant? I mean, don't you promote people on their, you know? And
Just one suggestion I would have, I believe I could be wrong, it's either a commissioner or a commissioner of civil service for the state. There is
Yes.
an executive in charge of that.
Right.
Maybe in a hearing, we could have someone have that person come in and is civil service the way it's applied in Boston the only way within that structure? Is it the structure that Boston has adapted?
Right.
And is there any proposals underway there that would that's already in process that we don't know about that might either add to the conversation or change it a bit? Since this discussion's been going on my entire lifetime. It's nothing new. I do think that at some point we need to start bringing out the highlights of the victories and change over the years and put them in one format to kind of articulate why there may be a need for a change, and then explore what those change, or that'd be more up to the administration to explore what those changes should be. But I think if we could highlight specifics that do bring a critical lens to this discussion, that would be value added.
Okay, great discussion. So we know where we're going from here. Susie, I wondered now, I'm not sure Chris is going to make it or not, but why don't we talk about the
OPAT
agenda item? Yeah,
I had the same thought process because that's a perfect segue. Unfortunately, I don't have too much information on it yet because it hasn't started yet. But what I will tell you is the director of OPAT, Stephanie Everett, has reached out to the commission. She's starting a small team or a coalition, which will include City Analytics, BPD, the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet Office, HRC, and I believe there might be others, but I'm not sure yet. It's regarding a RFP, a request for proposal that they're drafting. It will include the creation of equity assessment tools to evaluate BPD policies and procedures, and also semi-annually report on BIPOC hiring, promotion, and retention within BPD. So HRC will be part of this coalition to draft the RFP, and once a consultant is hired, to come up with a benchmark plan on what the consultant should focus on when in regards to these issues. That's the extent to. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm curious how that fits with the next piece on the agenda, and I'm curious how it fits with the new equity chief that's being created in the ordinance, who sounds like they're going to do the same thing you just described.
I don't have the answer for that. And I know that because we don't even have a start date on the coalition, again, I don't have details about it. That's the extent to what I have right now. Also, Chris Osgood just joined. I just wanted to highlight that. But
Okay.
to answer your question, Chairman, I don't have a definite answer to that. But this was brought forward and why I'm bringing it forward to you all. But that's the extent to the knowledge I have right now.
Yeah. Okay, because the BPD Civil Rights, the Boston Police Department Civil Rights
Mhm.
Unit was on collaboration on collecting hate crime data.
Right, and that's a separate topic, which I can talk
Right.
about later, but that's
Okay.
different from the OPAT, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I know it's different than the OPET thing.
Okay.
And just let me say, my concern about that is that there definitely should be another way to report hate crimes outside of the Civil Rights Division of the police. Right? This cannot be the only place to report hate crimes in the police department. There should be a way to report them at the Human Rights Commission, not just the police department. The hate crime numbers reported in the police department in Boston are very low.
Mhm.
And you can cooperate with them or collaborate with them, that's great. But all I'm suggesting is there's got to be a place at Human Rights where they can also come.
Right, and that is a conversation that I had with them regarding a potential referral partnership in a way, because they did bring up that they have hate incidents and hate crimes. So the hate incidents are the
Right.
ones that don't amount to a crime and all of that. So we have had conversations about those incidents that have not amounted to a crime, or victims that maybe don't want to pursue the matter in court, be referred to our office where Amber can investigate those and help those individuals, and potentially talk in the future more of doing outreach together, especially on the point of reporting, because reporting is the first step to realizing where exactly the issues are. That's more or less with the BPD partnership and collaboration, where it's going to become a referral partnership and hopefully work more in the future on using each other as resources.
Okay, but what I'm saying, and then let's go on, is
Sure.
you cannot depend on them as the sole place where hate crimes or hate incident reports come from. The Human Rights Commission has to also be a place where people can come.
Absolutely.
Because people don't all people do not trust going to BPD to report hate incidents. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we go on and have our second presentation from Talia. Talia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chairwoman, for the introduction. Good evening.
Good to see you again. Welcome.
Good to see you. It's been a while, and it's my great pleasure, absolutely, to address you today in my capacity as graduate intern of the Commission to present the progress on the Digital Equity Project that aims to contribute to bringing down the barriers that still hinder people from enjoying the opportunities of the 21st century and therefore realize their human rights that are inherently associated with broadband access. My deepest appreciation to you, Chairwoman, for all your work. You have been truly a great source of inspiration for me. Thank you as well for the opportunity you've given and all the encouragement to undertake this work. So my name is Talia. I am a doctoral candidate at the School for Global Inclusion and Social Development at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Good evening, everyone. I am deeply thankful for this precious opportunity to be part of the Commission's work. As a graduate student of a minority serving institution, this has been an illuminating experience. My appreciation to all the Commission and my UMass academic advisor, Professor Cindiso Missy Weeks, for her invaluable guidance. I also thank Dr. Roy Wada's supervision and support. Over these early months of the year, I was tasked with the research of 3 specific topics that are relevant for understanding how to better address the digital gap that impinges on several rights of minority groups disproportionately. First, I analyzed the federal infrastructure money that is being disbursed for the purpose of bridging the digital divide. Second, I undertook an analysis of best practices on how other local and state governments are spending the money. And third, I conducted an analysis of existing policy suggestions and guidance to achieve digital equity and inclusion across US cities. So this presentation will walk you in 10 minutes through some of the key aspects of the research, mainly the research methods, its findings across the 3 topics, and then I will sketch out some takeaways and conclusions. In the interest of time, as I will not go through in-depth references for each of these topics, I'd like to mention that these can be found in the final project report. The research applied a multi-methods approach, which drew on several sources of data. I attended webinars on grant programs to advance digital inclusion and equity at the state and local levels. 5 of these webinars were organized by the Federal Communications Commission. They touched on several important topics, such as how to connect Black communities and how to tackle the health and the disability-related challenges by providing reliable and high-speed broadband. 3 webinars were hosted by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which were very instructive on how states and cities could apply for funding by effectively fulfilling the notices of funding opportunities once they are released. The research also relied on academic and gray literature and pre-recorded videos of the National Association of Counties and NACO. The research also sourced information through 3 expert interviews conducted to the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and the Pew Charitable Trusts. I take this opportunity to thank the interviewees who so generously provided the project with their time, expertise, and insights. The American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provide the major sources of funding for bridging the digital divide in the country. Within these 2 acts, there are several buckets of funding, as the image shows. 5 of these buckets, the project has identified to be relevant specifically for states and cities, given their focus and rules. I'll go through each of them. Within ARPA, the state and local fiscal recovery funds, SLF, are more relevant to Boston than, for example, the Capital Projects Fund, because the former flow directly through states and localities. According to the Pew Charitable Trusts, the important thing about SLF funds is that they are very flexible compared to most federal funding. This means that there are multiple uses for them, broadband being one of the allowable uses. The requirement for being able to use them is that there is insufficient broadband service that can be defined in terms of the availability, reliability, or affordability. Hence, the SLF funds could technically be used for infrastructure and support affordability as well. On January this year, the Department of the Treasury released the final rule of this program, which took effect last April. The new rules have awakened a debate around how to better target the least served communities through these funds without having to compete with better off neighborhoods, which are also eligible. Within the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, the IIJ, signed into law on November 2021, $2.25 billion are earmarked for digital equity grants and planning, which will be disbursed to states, but of which municipalities can be sub-grantees. Particularly, the Digital Equity Act makes these funds available through 3 sequence programs to promote digital inclusion: the State Digital Equity Planning Program, the State Digital Equity Capacity Program, and the Competitive Grant Program. Eligible entities use the planning grant to develop a digital equity plan, which is required to participate in the capacity program. The NTIA issued these programs no fuss just 2 days ago on May 17th. Now, regarding the best practices on how local and state governments are spending the money, according to the Benton Institute in Boston, one of the actions the city could first take is making sure that those who don't have broadband subscriptions at home are aware of the Affordable Connectivity Program, for example. So it is important to do outreach to low-income households. Digital navigators, are people who usually go into the communities and help sign people up for subsidies. This particular model has been proven useful in cities like Austin, Texas, and Seattle, Washington. And according to this expert body, this model has had a positive effect across these cities. Also, among the best practices stand the city of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, which released a digital equity plan just last February. Having a plan is a requisite for states and cities to get funding from the IIJ. Crucially, Philadelphia conducted a survey to try to understand the nature of gaps in the city. So they had data, they had a process by which they solicited input from stakeholders in the community to come up with this digital equity plan. This particular step has been highlighted as a good model. And additionally, investing in networks and digital skill support helps address digital redlining, for example. For instance, in the city of Chandler in Arizona, it has used $4 million of ARPA funds already to replace and expand existing fiber optic cabling to increase resiliency of service and speed of operation. In the context of this project, we also reviewed the digital equity plans of Philadelphia, Portland, San Francisco, and Seattle to identify lessons that could inform the city of Boston's efforts towards accessing and leveraging the IIJ funds, particularly to ensure that all residents reap the full benefits of the digital age. Some of these lessons are leadership and centralized coordination. A central office coordinated the development of digital equity plans in Portland and Seattle within the city government. The existence of an official mandate for developing a plan in 2011 with an official mandate. Portland's Office for Community Technology pooled resources from multiple city departments to engage the community in the development of a digital inclusion plan. Another lesson is involvement from the ground up. The 4 cities created an inclusive planning process by engaging those without access to broadband at home and diverse groups of organizations. Further, each of the 4 cities engaged in their own research to guide their plans' goals and baselines. The digital equity plans of these 4 cities set goals, objectives, and strategic actions aimed at countering each of the main barriers hindering the residents' opportunities to access the digital tools. Based on this analysis, we found commonalities across the aspects that the FCC, the NTIA, and policy experts recommend as important to access the federal money and make the most out of it for bridging the digital divide. First, digital equity plans do facilitate the coordination and implementation of measures to address persisting barriers to digital equity and inclusion. Cities that have adopted a digital equity plan have done so because local governments make it a priority. Local planners should ensure that excluded groups are included in the digital equity planning as well. Using research from various sources to inform the planning process is a key aspect. It is crucial to learn from lived experts and also use a holistic data collection approach. Another lesson is building local digital equity capacity by ensuring staff and collaborators reflect the diversity of the geography. Also, outreach efforts are critical in rural and less populated areas among older adults and in communities with a large share of foreign-born residents. Given the level of funding, a robust monitoring system could help evaluate the program's effects on reducing digital barriers. To wrap up this presentation, there are some takeaways. First, ARPA's state and local fiscal recovery funds are relevant to the city of Boston, and so are the IIJ's Digital Equity Act programs and the Middle Mile Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program, whose no-fuss have been issued just 2 days ago. Accessing the funds require grantees some policy preconditions, including having a digital equity plan in place. Several US cities have demonstrated that it is possible to bridge the digital divide through planning, engagement, and sufficient funding. Finally, it is important to conclude by mentioning that this research trajectory has brought us into a crucial moment. Today, Boston is experiencing a unique and critical juncture where federal programs providing once-in-a-generation of funding opportunity align with the mayor's willingness to close the digital gap, thereby realizing the rights that are inherently associated with having access to reliable and high-speed broadband. This challenge requires an all-hands-on-deck approach, whereby governments, its multiple agencies, civil society, and service providers align toward the same goal. The city of Boston can greatly benefit from this potential, from the potential that these funds have for addressing digital inequities. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you again all for this precious opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much for not only this, but all the work you've done from the beginning. Is just amazing. And we're so appreciative, and I'm so appreciative. I know that Ann Schweiger and others have used your work and read it and used it in their conversations. But let me open this up and for questions. One of the questions I have from anybody is here, do we know, is there such a committee going on in Boston? Does anybody know?
That was my question as well. Is there a digital equity plan in the city of Boston? Is anybody working on that? By the way, I think that you did great. You have pivoted to equity, going into in line with the new administration. And I think you have, over the years, you have amassed an enormous amount of information. I'm getting the sense, however, that we do not, as a city, have a digital equity plan at all. And I wonder if one of the recommendations would be that there should be one.
Chris, you're the closest thing we have to an oracle here.
I actually just wanted to read his comment. He wrote a comment in the chat. So he said, thank you to Leah for this thoughtful and timely, thorough report. He is joined by Santiago Garces, the mayor's chief information officer. These recommendations are particularly helpful as we look to advance digital equity in Boston. We will work with Susie and Chair McKenna to follow up, and he thinks the commission's focus on this issue. I just want to make sure that everyone saw that.
So Chris, can we ask you, is there a digital equity committee working on this?
I do believe that's in the works. I do believe there's a digital equity convening of the different departments.
I know about that, but that's not a committee. I know about that. I knew that there was, all of the departments were brought together to talk about it, but it was just like, bring all of the departments together, right? But what I'm trying to figure out is, out of that, did there come a committee to work on this? And I bet no one here knows that, maybe. If you don't know, you don't know. I mean, you know.
Well,
But
it would be great if Boston could develop a digital equity plan. It's a little bit late to do so because the money is already here, but even so, I think it's extremely important, Talia, that the information you've gathered is submitted to the mayor and the people in the mayor's cabinet that are responsible for these, and that they check on with you because you are the expert on it.
I see that Chris is saying that it's in the works, and we're expected to put one, you know, they're putting one together. It's not together, but they know how important it is, and they're putting it together. And they do have some people who have some capacity in this area. I know Ann Swiger is certainly one of those, though she's got a couple other jobs too. So, you know, I think the important thing is to have someone in leadership in this position and move it, because the timing is now, right? Before losing this opportunity, and Talia's work certainly is a basis for it, to put something together. And if there's any way the commissioner, anybody on the commissioner, Talia or others can be helpful, I think the answer is we would be glad to in any way that we can. So we'd be glad to do that.
Commissioner, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I just volunteered.
Chairwoman, I just want to appreciate your words and Commissioners Reyes' words, and also Chris' comment. To your question, I would also like to express that to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of the internal processes, but I could say that at the state, for example, of Massachusetts, I have a hard time trying to get the state's plan. I know they do have an actual annual plan, which is not really a digital equity plan as such, you know, sketching out the goals, the objectives, and the strategies. So there's room for opportunity here, particularly, you know, having people and the public get access to it so that it could be, you know, treated as a baseline for progress and monitoring schemes as well.
Talia, do you know the timeline for this in terms of submitting proposals?
I do know that the NOFOs are up 2 days ago, and that was a question that was certainly asked by several cities during the webinars, and the NTIA and the FCC couldn't come with a precise answer. It's just a matter of getting into the NOFOs. But I'm sure is that several cities across the country are already, you know, having their hands on deck, this hands-on-deck approach to move forward as soon as possible, these plans.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions we have in this area? I mean, I always think of the you know, this is the new town square is broadband. It's a new way that, you know, we communicate and keep our democracy going, which is certainly been put at risk lately. And it's so important for people to have access to broadband, to good broadband. And as yet in Boston, we don't have that, and we should. And this is the time, right? This is the once in a lifetime opportunity. So if there's anything that we can do individually or as a commission, let us, we're willing to do that. So anything else from the commissioners? Or Reyes, you have your hand up, or is that up from before?
I think it was from before, but anyway, I was just wanted to say that if we do not develop a plan soon as a city, what is going to happen is that the providers are going to get away with the same thing that they're getting away right now. And then it would be very difficult to intervene. So this is a crucial moment to anticipate some of those moves.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Well, I appreciate what you've done. You folks, our 2 stars from UMass Boston, have provided more for this commission. I don't even know where to start to show our appreciation. It's just amazing what you've been able to provide as a basis of our work. And we are truly grateful and honored to have you part of our community. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate you and all you've done. And not only all you've done, but how the expertise that you have shown, your work has been outstanding. So thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go back to finish up the agenda, Susie. So can we go back to the BPD Civil Rights Unit collaboration? Do you understand what I was saying before?
Right, and
About-
I just wanted to clarify that we're not gonna have BPD, and I don't, maybe I said it incorrectly or it wasn't clear, like, we're not gonna have BPD be the sole place to go for hate crimes, but one way we can do that is collaborate, right? So they can refer to us, so then we can talk about an outreach strategy to make sure that individuals know that they could go to BPD or they could come to us. I don't know if there's additional questions or if that answered anything.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Understand, everybody understand?
I would like to know, I mean, I understand this is about the police, but how, in my experience, one of the places where hate crimes happen or hate incidents happen more often is at schools, at least in my experience. And also on the street when there's nobody, you can't go get anybody. So how are we going to be able to connect with the streets and the schools and these all these, even City Hall? How are we going to do that? I think we need to figure out that, in addition to the police reporting, of course, but that, as you all have said, is a smaller number of the incidents that happen in the city.
So Susie, you want to answer that?
I think that's something we can all talk about, how we can do outreach in the schools and figure out how we can get into the schools. I think the step with the BPD is a step in the right direction. And we can use this as a pilot maybe to see how we can get into schools and maybe even hospitals, but maybe using this as a pilot and then coming up together on a plan of how we could go to schools and other places, but I don't have a definite answer to that. Commissioner Russo, I saw your hand up too.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking along the same line as Ria's tonight. I'm in her brain for some reason. I was wondering if we could expand this collaboration with BPS.
Yeah. So I just came back from Los Angeles, and on their polls, they literally had, if you see hate, call 211. If you see a hate incident, call 211. Or you've been subject to a hate incident, call 211. I mean, that's how aggressive they've become about it. I mean, a number to call if you've been the subject or you've seen it. And, I'm not suggesting we put it on polls, but I think if you are serious about this kind of thing, you have to do that kind of thing. You can't expect people to go to the police and people go to the police because it's a crime, but we know lots of things happen on the street that are not a crime. And we said a long time ago, we'd like to know the sort of tenor of what's going on in the city. And one of the reasons where you get that is people, do hateful things to each other, and would like a sense of that either anonymously or not. And I think there could be a campaign of some kind, a public campaign of some kind that has that kind of language. If you see hate or you're the subject of it, call or report or, so we have that information. And it's not to the police, it's to us. That's what LA did. And you might check LA, see what their experience has been. Because they had it all over the polls. Call 211.
Absolutely. I think that's one really good suggestion. I think we should like open that up and explore that more, or even explore other things that I know was brought up last time, like an anti-hate coalition, like the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, because that's another option. I do think that's a larger conversation for the sake of time, because I'm also looking at the time. Not something we can come up with right now, but I think that that's the right direction. We just need to get into the specifics. But I do love the idea of like an anti-hate campaign of some sorts.
So why don't we go on to the next thing, which is an anti-hate crimes. I'm trying to remember where that came from. We were trying to learn more about it.
I think that was involved with the BPD altogether, the anti-hate and hate crimes. That was all linked together for the conversation.
I think it was some sort of group that was being put together, no?
It was the anti-hate coalition that we've been throwing around, but again, I think we should have the larger conversation to see if like if we should do an anti-hate coalition or if we should do an anti-hate campaign. But it was the anti-hate coalition that I had spoken about since we did some research on the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, because that was brought up in a previous commission meeting. Their anti-hate coalition, I believe, consists of 20 different agencies, everything from like law enforcement to schools. Schools. And I think that's something we should consider as a potential other strategy, in addition to maybe an anti-hate campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe its next meeting could come forward with some ideas about that.
Right. And I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
If they were, I think both are excellent ideas. And we have been moving in that direction as a commission, even little by little, we are moving into that direction, anti-hate campaign and anti-hate coalition. Do we anything in the budget in order to get this project going? It's a I know it's not my place to ask about the budget thing, but I'm anticipating with a little administrator head that I have that if we are going into that direction, we might want to start putting things on paper in order to build enough resources that we can do a campaign and that we can push really hard from the beginning and bring other folks that might also be very helpful, like Boston Public Schools and all these people we're talking about. So I'm just wondering whether the budget has funds for these kinds of things, even if it's a modest at the beginning.
And there are ways to get the message out that won't cost us money through public service announcements and things like that.
Right. I think in my suggestion is maybe at the next commission meeting, I don't know if you would like me to propose either, or we can come up to something together and then we can see what funds we may need or what funds we don't need. Like Commissioner Russo said, like might not need any if it's a collaboration, but I will leave it up to the commissioners for the next commission meeting if you would like to have that conversation or have a conversation about the bylaws and or possibly writing an ordinance, because I know we didn't get to that either. So I will leave it up to which one you would like at the next meeting.
I think the bylaws are more important right now.
Okay.
And also,
That's just my opinion.
but also, Susie, we do have money in the budget for the outreach person.
Yes, absolutely.
Are there line items that go along with that? There must be money that go along with that other than salary for outreach in the budget. I don't remember the budget off the top of my head.
We asked to see the budget, and maybe you should ask to see the budget again. Who represented the Human Rights Commission today at the budget hearing?
I did.
And what happened at that meeting?
It was a kind of generalized meeting. They asked about the partnership with BPD, any projects that we might be thinking of. I did bring up something along, we don't have a definite answer, but something along hate crimes. I shared our mission statement and some of the work that we did last year. But going back to the budget, again, I think that we should formulate a plan first and then look at that first. But I do agree with Commissioner Cole Telechea that I believe that our next meeting should revolve around bylaws and rewriting the ordinance before we get into something like an anti-hate campaign or coalition. I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
My only concern is that the city is now in the budget process. And
Exactly.
if this is something that we want to do in FY23, that we need to have the funds in there to move forward with it.
Yep. Yep. Yes. And who chaired the committee?
Councillor Fernandes Anderson.
Uh-huh. Because the woman, the city council who was really interested is the one who's the head of the Civil Rights Commission, Civil Rights Committee. She's new too. What's her name?
I believe you're talking about Councillor Lujan, Ruthie Lujan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I would suggest that I agree with Ann. If you want to do this, then ought to put in a request now for this, because next month is too late. Can you send us each the budget? Is the budget what we saw before? Is anything happened to it?
I honestly don't know what was sent before. And I don't know how it would work around requesting something if we don't know how much we would be requesting for that.
We saw our budget a couple of months ago. Is it the same budget now or has something happened to it?
I believe it's the same budget. I can't remember what was sent before, but I believe it was the same thing.
So why don't you send people the budget as it exists so people can see if there's enough room in it to do something like this? And then, maybe there's an opportunity to, go back and ask for a money to do a campaign on hate, or I don't know. And maybe there is enough time. I don't know how long they're meeting on budget stuff. It goes on for a while, I think. But maybe you send people the budget and then you will have an idea of what kind of flexibility there is within the budget. Because there is consulting help. I don't know what's in there. Okay?
Okay.
Why don't you send that out right
But
away?
yeah, there might be plenty of money if we're going to start. It's start modestly. We might not need to
Yeah,
ask for
right.
anything else, like Annie
and-
said
As
before.
Ann- Yeah, and as Ann said, there's ways to do it that don't cost a lot of money.
Right.
You can't do
But
it.
yeah, can we talk a little bit about the
Yes,
the-
absolutely. The bylaws.
the bylaws and
Yep.
stuff?
Yeah. Okay. The next agenda item was the bylaws in the ordinance. I open the floor. I will say the bylaws are based on an ordinance, so you have to be satisfied with the ordinance to do bylaws, but
I think if we are, right now, we have the ordinance that we have,
yeah,
the bylaws would, yes, of course, had to be based on that.
right.
Had to stand for that. It shouldn't be very complicated to do bylaws. But I think we cannot make them like this. It's impossible to do them in a meeting like this. So
Right.
I think we could maybe make a mini committee of some, Susie and 2 commissioners, or, review the ordinance, see what the ordinance give us space to do, and then develop a skeleton of bylaws and then have it voted at the next meeting. We
You
have a
might-
bunch of bylaws in Priscas.
Right. And you might borrow somebody from Adam's office,
Right.
even if it's a summer intern or, a new, as I always say, a baby lawyer. But, you might borrow somebody from his office to help. So.
I
who's-
think that it shouldn't be it shouldn't be difficult at all.
Okay.
But based on the ordinance, obviously, yeah.
All right, is this something, Reyes, you're interested in doing, heading?
With Susie, yes,
All right, and are you looking for another commissioner?
yes. Robert, okay,
Robert, great. All right, so Reyes and Robert, Susie, and why don't we ask Adam if he's got somebody who would work with you, okay?
It will
Just a-
probably be, I will say, Nyla Freeman, who is the attorney that's assigned to our cabinet in our department. But I will circle back with everyone after this.
Well, let's not, I would ask Adam because and maybe it will be her, but sometimes there are people who specialize in bylaws. But she may be absolutely the right person that Adam wants, and that would be fine. But I think you should ask Adam.
Wanted to add, I think what we should do is set up the meetings and then open it up to all commissioners who are
Yeah.
able to or want to participate.
Great.
And then maybe what we can do is kind of put together a nice briefing before the meeting so that everyone's on the same page. I think if there's going to be a challenge, once we start looking at what proposals are, the challenge will be reconciling where we want to be and what other people have tried. So I think that's where it would be very good to have maybe a couple proposals that we bring it back to an open meeting or a monthly meeting, and then we kind of vet it and walk it through so everyone understands why the proposal was made. And then all commissioners can have buy-in to that moving forward would be my
Okay.
my angle.
Okay, all right. Do you think we need a motion or we can just accept that as a sort of recommendation of the commission?
I'd make a motion to create
Okay.
a subcommittee of the commission to create bylaws in accordance with both the ordinance and best practices.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? Aye, all those opposed? Okay, so we have a motion seconded, and Reyes and Robert are appointed to that subcommittee. Supported by Susie, and we'll ask Adam to get somebody from his shop to support it as well. Okay, good work. And is there anything else before we go to public comments that we've forgotten? All
I
right.
don't have anything on my end.
Okay. Oh, okay, we will open the floor to public comments. You can put them in the chat, or you can I don't have my little script with me. Dial 9, is it?
It's
What is?
wait, if you're on the phone, you can dial *9. You can put it right on the chat, or you can email me at susan.helmy, HELMY@boston.gov.
Okay,
I have been monitoring the chat and the emails, and I don't have anything coming in.
right, okay. So if anybody has a comment or a question, we're open for comments and questions.
Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank the Chairwoman McKenna for the work she's done, for the leadership she's shown, and for the very tough times she has helped us going through, especially through the COVID. We've never been able to meet in person as a commission, and yet we have accomplished something. I'm especially grateful for your support of the research that the graduate students from UMass Boston have been able to provide. I think that not everybody would have been as welcoming and open-minded at our suggestions that the students could help the commission set up a good starting point with research. So personally, I'm extremely grateful. And I thank you on behalf, I think that everybody who has been in front of this commission.
Well, thank you. You guys have been the best part of it, I have to say. In working with you, it's been you know, a joy with you, Robert and Annie. I mean, for sure. So, and I expect to see good things come, or I will come and harass you. But I definitely will support you. There's a new message here. What's the message say? Oh. Okay.
This is my colleague, Professor Minisi
Oh,
Weeks. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, all of the UMass people have been great, just amazingly great. Amazingly great. You've made us look good.
Well, just I don't want to uncover any secret, but our executive director is also from UMass Boston.
Right.
I'm proud alumni.
Yeah.
I do not see any public comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
Alright.
none.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn 6:31?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you,
Okay,
Margaret.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Margaret.
Okay, you're welcome. Meeting is adjourned.
Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Be safe, everyone.
Be safe.